I kept showing up, smiling, and playing my old role. Then a small, casual comment at breakfast made everything click, and I drove home knowing I couldn't keep doing this again. You ever walk into a room and feel yourself getting smaller? That is what it feels like every time I visit my family. And I do not mean metaphorically. I mean like, my shoulders hunch. My voice gets quieter. My face muscles shift into this old shape I do not even recognize until it has already happened. And the worst part? I still go. Still show up. Still smile. Still ask how everyone is doing and pretend like everything is fine. Because that is what family does, right? I used to believe that. There was no single moment where it all fell apart. No fight. No betrayal you could point to and say, there, that is when it changed. It was more like slow erosion. A drip, drip, drip of moments that built up until something inside me started to rot. But to explain that, I have to go back. Before the weight. Before the shrinking. I have to start with the love. I was 8 years old when my dad spent an entire Saturday building a treehouse in our backyard. He had this old, beat-up tool belt that jingled when he walked. I remember watching him from the kitchen window while he worked, sawdust in his hair, humming some tune he made up. He let me hold the hammer, even though I could barely lift it. That treehouse was crooked as hell, but to me, it was a castle. I spent whole summers up there. First with my little brother, then alone, with a flashlight and some comics. And my mom, she used to sing to us when we were sick. That gentle voice, soft as worn flannel, used to carry through the house at night. When I broke my arm falling off my bike, she stayed up 3 nights straight just to make sure I was not in pain. That is the part people forget. The ones who say, why do you not just cut them off? They do not understand the roots. How deep they go. How love gets tangled up with guilt and habit until you cannot tell where one ends and the other begins. I was raised in a small town in Indiana. Nothing fancy. Church on Sundays. Dinner at 6. Everyone knew everyone's business. My family was not perfect, but we were close. Or so I thought. I moved away for college. Just a couple states over. Not a bold escape, more like a careful drift. Still called home every week. Still came back for holidays. Still remembered birthdays, anniversaries, all of it. And every time I visited, I felt it a little more, that shrinking feeling. The sense that no matter how far I had come, how much I had grown, the second I walked through their door, I was a kid again. Not in a warm, nostalgic way. In a trapped kind of way. Like someone had hit rewind and stuffed me back into a mold I had long since outgrown. At first, I ignored it. I told myself it was just stress, travel fatigue, or maybe I was imagining it, being dramatic. But the thing about a room that keeps shrinking? Eventually, you notice you can no longer breathe. That Thanksgiving, it finally became obvious. Not because anything exploded, but because nothing did. No one noticed what I had stopped doing. No one asked the question I had been aching to answer. And that silence? That was the moment everything started to shift. That Thanksgiving was like every other one before it. On the surface, the turkey was dry. The mashed potatoes were a little too salty. My mom had that tired smile she wore like makeup, and my dad kept his attention locked on the TV, even while pretending to participate in the conversation. My brother, Todd, arrived late like always, still acting like the rules did not apply to him. He made some joke about traffic even though he only lives 15 minutes away. Everyone laughed like it was fresh material. I sat there, poking at my plate, wondering how no one seemed to notice I had barely said 10 words all evening. At one point, I tested it. I stopped offering updates about my life. No mention of the project I had just finished at work or the new apartment I had moved into. Nothing. And guess what? No one asked. No, how is work? No, how have you been sleeping? Not even a lazy, what's new with you? The conversation moved on around me, just like it always did. My brother talking about his kids' t-ball league. My dad chiming in about some neighbor's car getting stolen. My mom asking if anyone remembered that casserole from 2 years ago, the one with too much dill. It was like I did not exist unless I was reacting to someone else's story. And yet, the moment I started to clean the dishes, my mom smiled like I had just stepped into my designated role. You always were the helpful one, she said. Like that was still my title in this cast of characters I never auditioned for. I did not even respond. Just kept washing the plates, letting the water scald the back of my hands. Somehow, it felt better than saying anything. That was the thing I started to notice more and more. These visits were not about connection. They were about performance. A rerun of a sitcom that never got good ratings in the first place. And every time I came home, I left feeling smaller. Like I had unlearned parts of myself just to keep the peace. It was not always like that. There used to be laughter. Real laughter. I remember once, when I was 17, my mom and I stayed up until 2 in the morning baking pies the night before Thanksgiving. She had flour on her nose. We listened to old records and talked about nothing in particular. I went to bed that night feeling like maybe I actually mattered. But that warmth had faded, slowly, year by year, until the shell was all that remained. The traditions stayed, the roles hardened, and the love, if it was still there, got buried under years of obligation. And still I showed up. Every time. Because love meant staying, right? At least that is what I told myself. But the next morning, I saw something, just a passing glance, a quiet moment, that made the whole house feel colder than it ever had before. Something that told me the roles were not just familiar. They were permanent. And I did not know if I could play mine anymore. It happened the next morning over burnt coffee and stale cinnamon rolls. I was sitting at the kitchen table, watching the sunlight hit the dust motes in the air, half listening to the morning news humming from the living room. Everyone else was doing their usual thing. My dad flipping through the paper like he was reading it for the first time, even though I knew he just skimmed the headlines. Todd was still asleep, of course. Mom was pacing between the sink and the counter, wiping down surfaces that were already clean. Then she paused, looked out the window, her hand gripping the edge of the sink just a little too tightly. I asked if she was okay. She said nothing for a second. Then, without turning around, she said, "You know, your brother might have to move back in. Things are not going so well with the new job." There it was. That slow, casual reveal. I nodded, kept my face still. But inside, something tensed. Not because Todd needed help. That was not new. It was the way she said it, like it was already a decision. Like I should have seen it coming. Like we all knew who would end up doing what. Then she glanced at me, just for a second. And I swear to you, that glance said everything. It said, "You will understand. You always do." It said, "This is what family does." It said, "Do not make this harder than it has to be." It was not cruel, not even cold. It was worse, it was automatic. That glance carried years of unspoken expectations, all folded neatly into a half-second of eye contact. I excused myself and stepped outside. The air was colder than I expected, crisp and biting. I stood in the backyard, staring at the tree where the old treehouse used to be. They tore it down a while back, said it was rotting. I remember being furious when they did it. They never asked. Just took it apart while I was out of town. It was falling apart, my dad had said. What were we supposed to do? Leave it there to collapse? Now, standing there, I realized something. They had never seen the treehouse the way I did. Not as something to be protected. Just another thing to manage, clean up, remove when it got inconvenient. And maybe, just maybe, they saw me the same way. A part of the house that served a purpose. Until it didn't. I went back inside, but something had shifted. The coffee tasted bitter. The walls felt closer. And for the first time in my life, I started asking myself a question I had always been afraid to answer. What if staying was not love? What if it was just survival? The ride home that weekend was quiet. Not just the road, me. I usually called a friend or put on a podcast to keep my mind occupied. But this time, I drove in silence. Just the sound of tires on pavement and that low hum you only notice when nothing else is playing. Somewhere outside of Dayton, I started going over conversations in my head. Things I wished I had said. Things I probably never would. And that question kept looping like a scratched CD. What if staying is not love? I had always told myself I was the strong one. The dependable one. The glue. I was the guy who showed up on moving day. Who covered dinner without making a big deal. Who remembered anniversaries and birthdays even when no one returned the favor. And I used to wear that like a badge. But lately, it felt more like a leash. There was this one time, about 2 years back, I tried to change the dynamic. Nothing dramatic. I just stopped answering the group chat right away. Let a few texts sit unread. Declined 1 or 2 invites. I wanted to see if anyone would notice. Maybe even check in. You know what happened? Nothing. A week later, my mom left a voicemail asking if I had been busy. She said it lightly, but I could hear the edge in her tone. Not concern. Disapproval. Like I had let the machine stall. So I apologized. Said work had been hectic. That I would be there next time. And just like that, I was back in the script. Back in the role. Back where they liked me. Reliable, agreeable, predictable. I had convinced myself that endurance was proof of love, that if I just stuck it out, stayed patient, showed up, things would shift. They didn't. What I learned instead was that guilt has a face. It looks like your mom sighing when you cancel. It sounds like your brother joking that you think you are better than us now. It smells like gravy on Thanksgiving, like pine needles in December, like every tradition soaked in resentment and wrapped in ribbon. But here's the twist. It is not all bad. That is the part that makes it hard. Because sometimes you do laugh together. Sometimes you do feel warmth. There are hugs that feel real, memories that still matter, but they come with a cost. And I was starting to realize I had been paying it without even knowing. I pulled into my apartment complex right as the sun dipped behind the buildings. Everything was cast in gold and shadow. For a second, I sat in the car with the engine off, hands on the wheel. And I whispered it out loud, just to hear how it sounded. This is hurting me. Not dramatic. Not angry. Just true. That night, I made a list. Just a small one. At the top, I wrote, ways I have tried to fix this. And as I went down the list, one quiet truth started to settle in. Every single attempt had failed. I still have that list somewhere. Scribbled on the back of an electric bill, smudged with coffee rings, and a few creases from being folded and unfolded too many times. It was not long. 5 items, maybe 6. But every one of them carried a memory I had been dragging behind me for years. 1. The time I brought up feeling left out of decisions. I had called my mom after they planned a family trip without me. Again, told her I felt like a second thought. She said it was not intentional. Said they just assumed I was too busy. You always say no anyway, she added. 2. The Christmas I asked if we could try something different. Maybe rotate who hosted. I had just moved into a new place and wanted to share it. My dad laughed and said, you know your mother likes tradition. That was the end of that. 3. The group text. I asked once, gently, if we could cool it with the constant teasing. I had never said anything before, but some of the jokes cut deeper than they thought. My brother replied with 3 crying laugh emojis and someone sensitive today. No one else said a word. 4. I offered to do family therapy once. Quietly, respectfully. I even offered to cover the cost. My mom said, we do not need therapy. We just need you to stop overthinking everything. 5. I sent a long email to my dad after he made a jab about my job at dinner. Explained how much it took to get where I am. No response. 2 weeks later, he sent me a meme. No mention of the email. 6. I tried silence. Just being present, patient, agreeable. I figured maybe if I stopped pushing, things would balance out. They did not. Looking at that list, I remember this dull ache forming in my chest. Not sharp, just persistent. Like something important was trying to get my attention. There was no explosion. No scene. Just that quiet, unignorable truth. They do not want this to change. Not because they are evil or cruel, but because the system works for them. And every time I show up, smile, laugh at their jokes, wash their dishes, hold my tongue, I am keeping it alive. I had spent years thinking I was holding the family together. But really, I was just holding myself hostage. That realization should have broken me. But instead, something unexpected happened. For the first time in years, I felt calm. And that calm was scarier than any anger I had ever felt before. It is a strange thing when you stop trying. Not in the defeated sense. Not the giving up kind of tired. But the clarity kind. Where you finally realize the fight has been one-sided for years, and all that effort. It was never mutual. That week, I did not call home. No texts. No updates. No checking in. And just like I suspected, nothing came back. The silence was not surprising. What got me was how peaceful it felt. There was no panic. No guilt spiral. Just space. I started sleeping better. I read more. Even my food tasted different, like I had been eating through static before. It should have scared me, how easy the distance felt. But it didn't. It felt like stepping outside after years in a crowded, noisy room and finally getting a full breath of air. Then, midweek, I got an envelope in the mail. Handwritten. From my mother. She never sends letters. That alone put my chest on alert. Inside was a short note. Just a few lines. Said she hoped I was not still upset about Thanksgiving, and that everyone misses you when you disappear like this. Then a little dig at the end, meant to sound sweet, but it stung. You know how sensitive you get sometimes. There it was again. That word. Sensitive. That is how they always framed it. Like the problem was not what they did, it was how I reacted to it. That one word had followed me for years. At first, I tried to prove it wrong. Then I tried to reclaim it. Eventually, I just wore it like a scar I stopped hiding. I almost called her. Almost picked up the phone to say, "That letter? That is exactly the problem." But I didn't. Instead, I folded it back up and slid it into the kitchen drawer with the batteries and twist ties. Buried it under the clutter. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slow. And I realized something. I was not angry anymore. Not really. I was just done. Done trying to twist myself into the shape of someone they could understand. Done returning to a place that made me feel like I had to earn love I had already given. Love, I was learning, does not always need a front row seat to survive. Sometimes it just needs space. But stepping back from something that shaped your whole identity, that is not as clean as it sounds. Especially when the past does not stay quiet. Because a week later, I got a call from someone I had not heard from in years. And the message they left? It changed everything. It was a Thursday. I had just gotten back from the grocery store. The phone was face down on the counter, screen buzzing against the laminate. I figured it was spam. But then I saw the name. Aunt Lisa. That stopped me cold. I had not spoken to her in, 5, maybe 6 years? She had always been the odd one out. My mom's younger sister. The one who moved out of state, missed a few holidays, and eventually stopped coming around entirely. Growing up, I remember how my parents talked about her, like she was selfish, dramatic, someone who thought she was better than the rest of us. Back then, I believed it. Now I was not so sure. She had left a voicemail. Her voice was softer than I remembered, like the edges had worn down. But it was her. No mistaking that quiet intensity. "Hey, it's Lisa. I heard you've been keeping your distance. Just wanted to say, I get it. Really, I do. And if you ever want to talk, I'm here." That was it. No guilt. No backhanded concern. Just a lifeline tossed gently into the water. I stared at my phone for a long time, just holding it, like it might bite. Then I hit redial. We talked for nearly an hour. About nothing at first. Work, weather, some books she was reading. But eventually, the conversation drifted into deeper water. I told her how I felt when I was with them. The way I shrank. The way the past clung to me like smoke I could not wash off. I told her about the glance my mom gave me by the sink. About the list. About the calm. She did not interrupt. Did not try to fix it. She just said, "Yeah, that sounds familiar." I asked her why she left. Why she really left. She paused, then said, "Because I realized love and peace were not the same thing. And I could not have both. So I picked peace." That hit me like a brick. Love and peace are not always the same thing. I had spent years trying to force them to coexist, thinking if I loved hard enough, long enough, the peace would come. But maybe that was never in the cards. Maybe the peace only arrives when you stop reaching back. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet for a long time. Not sad, not angry, just still. And in that stillness, I made a decision. A real one. The kind you do not walk back from. I did not announce it. There was no dramatic declaration. No text that said, "I'm done." Just a slow, steady pulling away. First, I muted the group chat. Then I backed out of the next family dinner. I said I had work, which was true, but even if it had not been, I would have skipped it. Then came my mom's birthday. Normally, I would send flowers, a card, maybe even call. This time, I sent a quiet message the night before. "Hope you have a good day tomorrow." That was it. And for once, I did not follow it with an apology or an explanation. The guilt came knocking, of course. It always does. That familiar ache in the chest. The voice that says, "They're your family. What if something happens? What if you regret this?" But I did not answer the door. Instead, I did something else. I booked a weekend away. Somewhere quiet, up north. Just me, a small cabin, and no signal. I brought books I had been meaning to read and left my phone in airplane mode. It rained the second night. Hard. Wind howling through the trees. Drops pelting the tin roof like they were trying to get in. I sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket, sipping tea I did not even like that much. And I felt something strange. Safe. Not from danger, but from expectations. From roles. From that invisible weight that always came with being the good one. I realized I was not running away. I was stepping out of a house I no longer lived in. A house that still looked like home, but had stopped feeling like it years ago. And the thing about stepping out? You start to see the whole picture. Not just what hurt, but also what held you back. What shaped your silence? What kept you performing long after the applause stopped? That night, I wrote in my journal. Just a few lines. I still love them. I probably always will. But I do not owe them my peace to prove it. That was the first time I admitted it fully. Love does not always mean proximity. Sometimes love just means letting go. But the moment I got back into town, there was a message waiting. Not from my mom. Not from Todd. It was from someone I had never expected to hear from again. And what they said, it forced me to reconsider everything. When I turned my phone back on, it buzzed like it had been holding its breath. A dozen missed calls, some from unknown numbers. A few messages from extended family, cousins I had not spoken to in years. One from my mom, just a simple, call me when you can. But the one that stopped me? It was from my dad. We had never been close. He was always more of a presence than a participant. Quiet at the dinner table. First to turn the game on, last to notice when something was wrong. We spoke in brief nods and half sentences. That was just how it had always been. He had never texted me before, not once, not in my entire adult life. All the message said was, "Your brother's in the hospital. Thought you'd want to know." That was it. No context. No "how are you?" No sign of warmth. Just an obligation passed down like a tired envelope. For a minute, I froze. Then that familiar wave started rising. The panic, the guilt, the mental scramble to book a flight, clear my schedule, drop everything, and go back. Because that is what you do, right? But then I paused. Not out of coldness. Not because I did not care. But because I had changed. I texted back, "What happened?" He replied 10 minutes later. "Collapsed at work. Dehydration or something. They're keeping him overnight for observation. He'll be fine." And just like that, the urgency faded. My hand stopped shaking. I could breathe again. He was fine. It was not the end of the world. But still, I knew what was coming next. That text was not about Todd. Not really. It was bait. And sure enough, the next message came an hour later, from my mom. "Since everyone will be together, it would really mean a lot if you came. Just for dinner. No pressure. We miss you." No pressure. That made me laugh. It was the same phrase she always used right before the pressure showed up. But this time, I did not say yes. I did not even say maybe. I said something I had never said before. "I love you, but I need space right now. I hope you understand." I sat there, staring at the screen, waiting for the fallout. Waiting for the reply that would guilt me back into place. But it never came. And in that silence, something finally clicked. This was not a fight. This was not some war I had to win. It was just a boundary. And for once, I was not afraid to hold it. But boundaries come with consequences. And the next morning, I woke up to find something left at my door. No note. No explanation. Just a small box. And inside it, something that nearly broke me. It was early, barely light out. I had not even made coffee yet. There it was on my doorstep. A small, unmarked box. No return address. No note. Just plain brown cardboard. The kind you barely notice until it is already in your hands. For a second, I thought maybe it was something I ordered and forgot about. But it was too light. I shook it gently. Something shifted inside, soft, but solid. I took it inside. Sat down on the couch, heart thudding louder than it should have. When I lifted the lid, I stopped breathing. Inside was the photo. Me and my brother, in the old treehouse. I was maybe 10. He was 6, still missing his 2 front teeth. We were both grinning wide, cheeks smeared with dirt, arms slung around each other like we actually liked each other. That photo had been in the hallway at my parents' place for as long as I could remember. Same cheap wood frame. Same crack in the corner where it had fallen once. And now it was here, in my apartment. I stared at it for a long time. Then, underneath it, a piece of notebook paper, torn, uneven. For words, scrawled in my mom's handwriting. "We did love you." That was it. No plea. No apology. Just a truth, delivered quietly. Like it had been waiting years to be said. And I will be honest with you. Those 4 words? They broke me. Not because they were cruel, but because they were real. I sat on the floor, holding that picture, crying in a way I had not allowed myself to cry since I was a kid. Not out of pain, exactly. Just from everything. The grief, the love, the loss of what could have been. The strange relief of knowing I had not imagined at all that there was love once. Just not enough to keep me whole. People think walking away means anger. Sometimes, it just means choosing to stop bleeding where no one noticed you were cut in the first place. I did not return the photo. I keep it tucked away in a drawer. Not out of spite, but because it is part of the story. A reminder that love existed. But so did the cost. And now, I get to decide where my love goes. I still think about them. I still care. But I do it from a distance. A safe one. Because love does not mean letting yourself be broken again and again just to prove you are loyal. Sometimes love means walking away quietly, so you can finally hear yourself think. Sometimes it means letting go of the picture you try to fit into for years and starting to draw your own.